The night Madison Blake stopped belonging at the Alpha King's table began with Ethan Cole forgetting she was sitting beside him. Not forgetting her name. Not forgetting that she was his bonded Omega. Forgetting something smaller and, in the end, more damaging. He forgot to notice whether she was still part of the evening at all. The treaty feast had been planned for 6 weeks. 200 guests filled the great hall beneath black and silver banners, and the long royal table glittered with candlelight, crystal, and polished steel. Madison wore a deep green gown Ethan had once said made her eyes look brighter. He noticed it when she entered. He touched the small of her back, told her she looked beautiful, and promised that after the first toast they would actually eat together. Then the first envoy arrived. Ethan stood to greet him. A border captain pulled him aside. A councilman asked for 5 minutes. 5 became 20. By the time soup was served, Ethan had spoken to half the room and Madison had eaten 3 bites alone. She was used to this. That was what made the evening dangerous. She smiled at visiting Lunas and answered questions about winter relief because those were easier than pretending the night was going differently. When Ethan returned, he sat for less than 2 minutes before Lord Marcus Hale leaned over and asked about cavalry funding. Ethan rose again. Across the table, Lady Rebecca Dunn watched Madison with a thin smile. "You are very patient," Rebecca said. Madison knew the tone. "I have had practice. A Luna needs that." Madison looked at her. "I am not Luna. Not officially." Rebecca lifted her glass. "Still, you sit in the chair." 2 other women heard and lowered their eyes. Rebecca continued softly. "Some chairs are easier to occupy than titles." Madison felt heat rise behind her face. Ethan was 15 feet away laughing at something an envoy said. He did not see. He did not hear. During the main course, a clerk brought Ethan a folder. He read it standing behind Madison's chair, one hand resting on the carved wood above her shoulder, then walked away without speaking to her. It was such a small act that no one else would have remembered it. Madison did. By dessert, she had become part of the furniture. Present, useful, decorative, unseen. Ethan finally returned as the musicians began playing. "I am sorry," he said, sitting down. "The room is impossible tonight." Madison looked at him. "Did you enjoy dinner?" Ethan glanced at his untouched plate. "I barely ate." "Neither did I." He smiled tiredly. "We will eat upstairs." "That is not what I meant." His smile faded. "What happened?" Madison almost laughed. "You do not know. I have been working. At the feast where I was seated beside you." "Madison." Rebecca Dunn spent 10 minutes explaining that I occupy a chair without holding a title. Marcus Hale asked me whether relief work was a suitable hobby for an Omega. 3 people congratulated me on your treaty as if I carried the folders. Ethan's face hardened. "I will speak to them." "That is not the point." "Then what is?" She looked toward the crowded hall. "You leave me alone at every feast, Ethan. Then afterward you fix whatever someone said while you were gone. You never ask why I keep being left there to absorb it." He lowered his voice. "These events are work. For me too. You know what I mean." Madison stood. Ethan glanced around, suddenly aware that nearby guests might notice. "Sit down. We can talk upstairs." "No. Do not turn this into something larger than it is." That sentence settled everything. Madison looked at the gold-rimmed plate, the silver cup, and the carved chair everyone in court associated with her. "You are right," she said. "It is only a feast." Ethan relaxed slightly, misunderstanding. Madison picked up her gloves. "So you will not need me at the next one." She left through the main doors. Ethan watched her go, irritated, embarrassed, and certain she would cool down by morning. 3 nights later, the next state feast began. Madison's chair was occupied before Ethan entered the room. And for the first time, someone else's name was written on the silver card where hers had always been. Ethan stopped so abruptly at the entrance to the royal dining hall that Daniel Price nearly walked into him. The senior steward followed the king's stare toward the high table. Olivia Hart sat in the chair to Ethan's right, speaking quietly with the trade minister. She wore silver gray, the color of her late husband's house, and looked exactly like what the council liked to call appropriate. Noble-born, widowed, politically connected, familiar with court. Ethan turned to Daniel. "Why is Olivia sitting there?" Daniel's expression remained neutral. The seating office reassigned the place after Miss Blake declined the feast. "That is Madison's chair." "It is the chair beside the king, Your Majesty." The distinction irritated him. "Who approved it?" "The Household Protocol Committee." Ethan looked again. Olivia noticed him and rose. "Is there a problem?" "No." The answer came automatically because 100 guests were waiting for him to sit down. Ethan took his place. Olivia sat beside him. The feast began. For the first 20 minutes, Ethan told himself the arrangement meant nothing. Olivia was a senior diplomatic advisor. The seat was useful. Madison had chosen not to attend. No one had done anything wrong. Then a visiting alpha leaned across the table and said, "Lady Hart, it is good to see stability restored at the king's side." Olivia's face cooled. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "Lady Hart is here in her diplomatic capacity," he said. The alpha smiled. Of course. The words sounded harmless. Their meaning did not. Ethan looked down. Madison's usual silver place card was gone. In its place, engraved in fresh black ink, was Olivia Hart. He had seen Madison's name beside his at dozens of feasts without thinking about it. Now another name occupied the same space, and the sight felt unexpectedly intimate. Olivia leaned toward him. "You should know there are already rumors." "About what?" "About me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "There is nothing to discuss." "That will not stop the discussion." She took a sip of water. "Your council has spent 2 years complaining that Madison is common-born. Now she misses one feast, and I am placed in her chair." It was a seating decision. Olivia gave him a flat look. "You are the Alpha King. At your table, seating is never just seating." Ethan thought of Madison saying the same thing in a different form. "For me too." Across the hall, Rebecca Dunn was whispering to Margaret Cole. Rebecca glanced toward Olivia, then toward Ethan, and smiled. Ethan no longer saw an efficient seating arrangement. He saw a story being written without words. The common-born Omega had stepped away. A noblewoman had taken her place. And Ethan, by sitting down without objection, had allowed the story to look official. He pushed his chair back. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Where are you going?" "To correct the seating. During dinner." Apparently timing matters. Ethan found Daniel near the service doors. "Move, Olivia." Daniel's face remained still. "Where?" "Anywhere appropriate." "Lady Hart is appropriate where she is." Ethan lowered his voice. "You know what I mean." Daniel hesitated. "Do I?" Ethan stared at him. Daniel had served his father for 30 years and had mastered the art of disrespecting kings without changing expression. "Miss Blake did not own that chair," Daniel said quietly. "But everyone believed the place meant something because she sat there. If your majesty wants the court to believe it means nothing now, moving Lady Hart halfway through dinner may create a different rumor." Ethan hated that Daniel was right. He returned to the table. Olivia looked at him. "You cannot fix symbolism after the room has already understood it." Ethan sat. "Then what do I do?" "Ask why Madison was willing to give up a place everyone else thinks is valuable." After dinner, Ethan went to Madison's rooms. They were not empty, but they felt altered. Half her formal gowns were gone. So were the jeweled hairpins she wore only at state events. On the desk lay a note for the household office. Madison had withdrawn from all ceremonial dinners for the remainder of the treaty season. Ethan read the line twice. She had not left the palace. She had not ended the bond. She had simply stopped appearing where he had taught himself not to see her. The next morning, gossip reached the outer courtyard. By noon, 2 council members were openly discussing whether Olivia Hart would make a more suitable Luna. Ethan finally understood that another woman had not merely taken Madison's chair. The court had begun testing how easily Madison could be replaced. Olivia Hart ended the rumor before Ethan did. She walked into the council chamber at 10 the next morning, placed a stack of diplomatic reports on the table, and said, "If anyone uses my name in another conversation about becoming Luna, I will personally send the transcript to every pack represented at this court." 3 elders looked offended. Marcus Hale said, "No one has made a formal proposal." Olivia answered, "You do not need one to manufacture expectation. You needed only a chair." Margaret Cole, Ethan's aunt and former council chair, called the seating reasonable until Olivia reminded her that Lady Rebecca had congratulated her before dessert. Ethan looked at Hale. "Did you encourage this?" Hale spread his hands. "The court notices patterns, Your Majesty. Miss Blake has always been a difficult fit for the role. Her absence simply made the question visible." Ethan stood. "There is no question." "Then perhaps there should be. A king's maid is not only personal." Ethan's temper sharpened. "Madison is not a vacancy." Hale fell silent. Olivia looked at Ethan. "Good. Now say it when she is in the room." The council session ended badly. Ethan dismissed half the agenda and went searching for Madison. He found her in the public relief office on the lower floor, seated with 2 clerks and a village representative. She wore plain navy wool and had her hair tied back. No jewels, no royal colors. She looked more focused than she ever did at a feast. Ethan waited by the door until the meeting ended. Madison gathered the papers before acknowledging him. I heard about Olivia. It was not my decision. I assumed that. Her lack of anger unsettled him. You understand what people are saying. Yes. And you are not upset. Madison considered it. I am tired. That is not the same thing. No, it is worse. Ethan stepped closer. I never intended for anyone to think you were being replaced. You never intended for anyone to think I was ignored either. He stopped. Madison continued arranging the papers. You keep focusing on intent because it is kinder to you than impact. That is unfair. Is it? He almost answered, then remembered Olivia's warning. Say it when she is in the room. Ethan took a breath. No, it is probably not. Madison's hand stilled. The chair mattered because you sat there, he said. I should have understood that. The chair mattered because the court understood it. You did not. Ethan looked toward the corridor. I noticed when Olivia sat there. Madison gave a small, sad smile. Exactly. That hurt more than accusation. He had noticed another woman in Madison's place before noticing Madison disappear from it. I want you back at the next feast, he said, then immediately knew he had failed again. Madison's expression closed. Why? Because I do not want the court writing this story. Then correct the court. It will be easier if you are there. For you. For us. No. Her voice remained calm. My presence has been doing too much work for that word. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Madison set the final folder aside. When I sit beside you, everyone sees stability. They see the king and his omega. They assume I am protected, respected, included. You get the appearance of a relationship that you stop participating in the moment someone more important enters the room. There is no one more important. At every feast, there are 20 people more urgent. Ethan opened his mouth. She raised one hand. Urgent is not the same as important. I know that. But you never learn how to make me feel the difference. The sentence left him with nothing to defend. Madison picked up her coat. I have a meeting in the lower district. Tonight. Yes. There is another council dinner. I know. Will you be there? Madison looked at him for a long moment. No. She walked past him. Ethan watched her leave the relief office and realized the problem had changed. At first he had wanted the chair restored. Now he was beginning to understand that restoring the chair without restoring the woman's sense of being seen would only repeat the same mistake with better manners. Ethan went to Madison's apartment that evening without a plan, which was unusual enough that Daniel noticed. No guards. The steward asked. No. No flowers. No. Daniel considered him. Promising. Ethan gave him a look and continued upstairs. Madison opened the door in stocking feet, holding a cup of tea. You are persistent. I have been told. Usually by people who mean it as praise. Not tonight. She let him in, but did not offer him tea. Ethan sat on the edge of a chair. In council, silence was a weapon. With Madison, it felt like evidence. How many feasts? He asked. She leaned against the table. What? How many times did this happen before last week? Madison looked away. I do not know. Roughly. Ethan, I did not keep a ledger. I am not asking for proof. Then why ask? He searched for an honest answer. Because I am trying to understand the size of something I treated as small. Madison lowered the cup. Almost every major feast for 3 years. He felt the number in his chest. 3 years. The first year after we bonded, you stayed near me. You introduced me to people. You checked whether I knew anyone. You noticed when I was quiet. Then my father died. Yes. And I became king. Yes. So I was overwhelmed. Yes. Her agreement made the excuse collapse. Ethan rubbed his face. You always understood. That became my job too. She sat across from him. Do you know what happened at the Winter Treaty Feast 2 years ago? There were 6 delegations. That is what you remember. He waited. Rebecca Dunn asked whether common-born Omegas were trained in table etiquette before being bonded upward. You were 8 feet away. Ethan stared at her. I never heard that. I know. Why did you not tell me? I did. Later. You sent Rebecca a formal warning. Then I handled it. Madison's expression turned almost gentle. You handled Rebecca. You did not handle the fact that I spent the rest of the evening sitting alone while you worked the room. Ethan looked down. What about last spring? She continued. The founder's banquet. I gave the opening address. Then you left the high table for 40 minutes. Marcus Hale asked me 3 times when I planned to produce an heir because apparently my body was suitable dinner conversation. Ethan's jaw hardened. I will remove him from. Stop. Madison's voice sharpened for the first time. This is what you do. You hear the insult and reach for punishment because punishment lets you feel active. I am asking you to hear the loneliness. Ethan went still. Madison's eyes were wet now, though no tears fell. I sat beside an empty chair more often than I sat beside you. And because your name was carved into the back of it, everyone still thought I was the fortunate one. Ethan felt shame move through him, slower and heavier than anger. Why stay? He asked. Because I loved you. Because outside those rooms you were kind. Because neglect is confusing when it lives beside love. That answer removed every defense he had left. When he opened them, Madison had turned toward the window. Olivia is not the problem, she said. I know. The court is not even the main problem. I know. Do you? Ethan nodded slowly. I think the problem is that I believed loving you privately canceled out failing you publicly. Madison looked back at him. That is closer. He stood. I am going to fix the rumors. Good. But I am not going to ask you to come back to the table to help me do it. Something changed in her face. Not forgiveness. Attention. At the door, Madison mentioned a relief supper in the lower district. Ethan knew the date from the office calendar. It is not a royal event, she warned. I understand. And I did not invite you. Also understood. He stayed at the palace the next evening. When Daniel later mentioned the supper had drawn more than 80 people, Ethan wondered what Madison looked like at a table where no one expected her to disappear. 2 days later, Ethan found out by accident. A rainstorm canceled his inspection of the southern barracks, and the alternate route back to the palace took his carriage through the lower district. Near the old market hall, lanterns glowed beneath a canvas awning. Music drifted into the street. Ethan recognized the relief committee's blue banner and told the driver to stop. Your Majesty, the guard asked. I am not going in. He meant it until he heard Madison laugh. Ethan had not heard that laugh at a royal feast in years. He stepped beneath the awning's edge, half hidden by rain. Inside, long wooden tables were crowded with shopkeepers, widows, laborers, children, and relief workers. Madison sat halfway down one table, sleeves rolled to her elbows, telling a story about a relief wagon stuck in a ditch. People interrupted her, and she interrupted back. A child asked a question, and she stopped to answer. A woman from the textile quarter drew her into another conversation, and Madison leaned in and stayed. Ethan watched for 10 minutes before anyone noticed him. It was Olivia Hart, of all people, carrying a plate of pie. She stepped outside. You look suspicious standing in the rain. I was passing. Kings are always passing when they are caught somewhere inconvenient. Ethan ignored that. She is different here. Olivia followed his gaze. No, she is not. He looked at her. She is different with you. The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Ethan watched Madison again. At palace feasts, she was composed, careful, quiet. Here she took up space. Not because these people respected her more than the court did, though many probably did. Because she expected to be heard. She has not withdrawn, Ethan said. Olivia shook her head. She withdrew from your table. Do not confuse the two. Ethan stayed outside because Madison had not invited him. When she finally saw him, he only raised a hand. Madison nodded and returned to her conversation. Ethan went back to the carriage. The next morning, he summoned Daniel and the protocol committee. No one sits in Madison's former place unless the seating chart has a reason unrelated to symbolism, he said. The committee secretary blinked. Your Majesty, every seat at the high table has symbolic meaning. Then write the meaning down. He slid a new draft across the table. Diplomatic advisor, military commander, trade envoy, whatever the role is. No seat will be used to imply courtship, succession, mating, or replacement without the written consent of the people involved. Daniel read the page. That will annoy the council. Good. Ethan then ordered the next royal feast invitations revised. Madison's name was not automatically included as hostess. Instead, she received the same written invitation as every other senior official, with a line stating attendance was optional. He did not send a private note. At dinner that evening, Olivia sat beside the trade minister. The chair to Ethan's right remained empty. Marcus Hale noticed. Are we creating a spectacle now? Ethan cut his food. No. The court will ask whether Miss Blake is returning. Then tell them I do not know. That is not reassuring. Ethan looked at him. It is accurate. Hale leaned closer. You are allowing an Omega to destabilize royal presentation over hurt feelings. Ethan set down his fork. No. I destabilized it by using her presence as presentation while ignoring the person providing it. Several conversations nearby stopped. Ethan continued, loud enough for the table to hear. Madison Blake's relief work, diplomatic hosting, and household mediation have been credited to the Crown for years. Effective immediately, those records will carry her name. Hill's face tightened. And her position? She decides whether she wants one. Ethan resumed eating. Across the room, Daniel met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Madison did not hear the statement from Ethan. She heard it the next morning from 3 different clerks who arrived at the relief office carrying corrected records. That mattered more. For the first time, Ethan had changed something without making sure she was watching him do it. The next royal feast was smaller, only 60 guests, but Ethan treated it like a private test. He reviewed the seating chart himself. Madison was listed among invited officials, not the royal household, and no seat had been assigned because she had not accepted. Olivia sat with Westridge. The chair at Ethan's right had been removed. You are making people nervous, Margaret said as she entered. Excellent. Do not enjoy reform too much. It becomes vanity very quickly. Ethan smiled despite himself. You sound like Madison. That should worry you. During dinner, no one replaced Madison. More importantly, Ethan stayed in his chair. He had told his aides to bring only matters that could not wait 2 hours. The kingdom survived. Near dessert, Daniel delivered a sealed envelope. Ethan looked at it, then placed it beside his plate unopened. Margaret noticed. Urgent. If it were urgent, Daniel would say so. She studied him. You could always do that. Apparently. The next morning, Ethan opened the envelope. It was an invitation from the Lower District Relief Committee to a planning dinner at the Old Market Hall. The invitation was addressed to Alpha King Ethan Cole, not to the palace. Madison's name appeared at the bottom with 5 other organizers. He checked the date. Thursday at 7. Ethan wrote back accepting. On Thursday, he arrived at 6:55 with 1 guard, whom he left outside. Madison was arranging cups when she saw him. You came. I was invited. I noticed. I also came on time. She glanced at the clock. 5 minutes early. Dangerous precedent. He smiled. The dinner was nothing like court. There were no place cards. Ethan sat wherever an empty chair appeared, which happened to be between a schoolteacher and a carpenter. Madison sat across from him. For 90 minutes, Ethan listened to complaints about heating grants, medicine deliveries, and impossible palace forms. His instinct was to solve each problem immediately. Madison stopped him twice. Let them finish. So he did. When the carpenter criticized royal inspection fees, Ethan did not defend the policy. He asked what the fee had cost his business. When a widow described waiting 3 months for compensation, Ethan wrote down the case number. Madison watched him, not warmly, but carefully. Halfway through dinner, an aide appeared at the door and motioned for Ethan. Every muscle in his body reacted. Stand. Leave. Handle it. Madison saw. Ethan looked at the aide. Can it wait? Yes, Your Majesty. Then it waits. He stayed seated. The moment lasted less than 10 seconds. Madison looked down at her plate. Ethan knew better than to turn it into a performance. After dinner, people lingered over coffee. Ethan remained until the final cup was poured. When he finally stood, Madison walked him to the door. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. You listened. I am trying. Do not make that sentence expensive. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Do not expect praise every time you behave like a person instead of a king. He laughed softly. Fair. They stepped outside. The street smelled of rain and wood smoke. Ethan wanted to reach for her hand. He did not. There is a founder's feast next month, he said. Madison's shoulders tightened. I know. You will receive an invitation. All right. No assigned seat. She looked at him. Why are you telling me? Because I want you to know the invitation is not a request to resume your old role. Madison studied his face. And if I come and sit somewhere else, then I hope the food is good where you sit. Her mouth curved. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first smile he had earned rather than borrowed from the life they used to have. The weeks before Founder's Feast became strangely ordinary, which was what Madison needed. Ethan sent no jewelry and did not appear at the relief office unless invited. Small things changed instead. Palace forms were simplified after the market hall dinner. 2 delayed compensation cases were resolved. The protocol committee published written rules for symbolic seating, including a requirement that no person be presented as a romantic or political match without consent. Olivia sent Madison a copy with a note that read, "Apparently furniture can now be regulated." Madison laughed and kept the note. Ethan also began attending one relief planning dinner every other week. Not every week. That had been Madison's condition. "I do not need the king turning a community committee into a royal audience," she told him. He accepted the limit. Sometimes he spoke too much and caught himself. Once a real border emergency made him leave early. He sent a short explanation and simply came to the next meeting when scheduled. Trust returned in pieces too small for court gossip to see. At the palace, the lack of a clear romantic narrative irritated everyone. Marcus Hale asked Ethan twice whether he intended to name a different Luna candidate. Ethan answered the same way both times. There is no vacancy to fill and no appointment to make. Margaret finally told Hale to stop asking. The day before Founders Feast, Daniel brought Ethan the final seating plan. There was no chair reserved beside him. "If Miss Blake attends," Daniel asked, "she chooses from the open seats. And if she chooses the far end of the hall." Ethan signed the page. "Then I will know where she chose to sit." Daniel nodded. "You are becoming inconveniently reasonable. Do not spread it around." Meanwhile, Madison stood in front of her wardrobe considering whether attending was a mistake. She had skipped every royal feast for nearly 3 months. The first absence felt like escape. The second felt like defiance. After that, not attending simply became normal. Founders Feast was different. Her relief office had been invited as an official delegation because Ethan had pushed the council to recognize public welfare work as part of governance. If Madison stayed away, she would be avoiding a room she no longer wanted to control her. That irritated her. She chose a dark blue gown with no royal insignia. On the night of the feast, she entered through the main doors with 4 relief workers. Ethan saw her immediately. Every old instinct urged him to stand, cross the room, and bring her to his side before someone else decided what her arrival meant. He remained where he was. Madison saw that too. Daniel approached her with the seating chart. "Ms. Blake, there are places with your delegation near the east table, one with the trade committee, and 2 open seats near the center." Madison glanced toward Ethan's high table. There was no empty chair waiting beside him. The absence felt unexpectedly respectful. "East table," she said. Daniel smiled. "Very good." Madison sat with the relief workers. Ethan did not summon her. He did not send a note. During the opening toast, he thanked every department represented, including public welfare, without singling her out. Madison talked, ate, and laughed when the carpenter from the market hall complained that palace wine tasted like expensive vinegar. Across the room, Ethan heard her and understood. She sounded like herself when she was free to choose the conversation. Near the end of the feast, Marcus Hale approached Ethan and glanced toward Madison. "You are really going to let her sit there?" Ethan followed his gaze. "She appears to be sitting successfully." Hale frowned. "People will notice." "Good." Ethan turned back to his plate. "Maybe they will learn that being my mate does not require being furniture at my table." Madison did not hear the sentence. Olivia did, and nearly choked on her wine, trying not to laugh. After the final toast, Madison stayed with her delegation until the hall began to empty. She could have left without speaking to Ethan. 3 months earlier, that would have felt like victory. Tonight it felt unnecessary. She found him on the balcony outside the great hall, alone for once, looking down at the torchlit courtyard. "The wine was terrible," she said. Ethan turned. "I have been told. You approved it." "I was lied to." Madison leaned against the stone railing. For a moment, neither mentioned the feast. Ethan looked back through the open doors toward the east table where Madison had sat. "Did you have a good evening?" "Yes." "Good. That is all." He glanced at her. Was there supposed to be a second answer? Old Ethan would have asked why I did not sit closer. Old Ethan had poor table manners. Madison smiled. Silence settled between them, comfortable enough to be dangerous. Ethan spoke first. "I missed you beside me." Her smile faded. "I know. But missing you is not the same as needing you there." Madison looked at him carefully. "That is new. I am trying not to confuse wanting with entitlement." "Also new." Ethan nodded toward the hall. "When Olivia sat in your place, I was angry because it looked wrong. It took me longer than it should have to understand why." "Why?" "Because I noticed the replacement before I noticed the absence." Madison's throat tightened. He continued. That is the part one I'm most ashamed of. I had become so used to you adapting to me that I only saw the shape you filled when someone else filled it. Madison stared into the courtyard. I hated her for about 10 minutes. Ethan blinked. Olivia. Yes. Then I realized she had done nothing. She threatened the council. That helped. Ethan smiled. Madison's hands tightened on the stone railing. I do not want to go back to what we were. Neither do I. I am not ready to move back into the royal wing. All right. I am not ready to attend every feast. Then do not. And I am not promising to become Luna on anyone's schedule. Ethan took a breath. Understood. She looked at him. You are agreeing very quickly. I have learned that arguing with boundaries is usually a sign I am about to become the problem. That made her laugh. Ethan's expression softened. Can I ask one thing? Madison waited. Would you have dinner with me next week? Where? Somewhere with no high table. You have learned. Painfully. Tuesday. Ethan mentally checked his schedule, then stopped. I will confirm by tomorrow morning. Madison raised an eyebrow. You do not know if you are free. I know better than to promise before checking. She nodded. That answer is better than yes. The next morning, Ethan sent a message. Tuesday at 7 works. If the council changes it, I will tell you before noon. Madison accepted. Over the next 2 months, they ate together 4 times in ordinary places. Ethan was late only once, by 12 minutes after a bridge accident, and had sent word beforehand. Madison noticed how ridiculous it felt that ordinary reliability could matter so much. That was precisely why it mattered. She also watched him change in public. At council receptions, Ethan finished conversations with her before turning to officials. If someone interrupted, he said, "One moment." He behaved as though her words occupied time that belonged to her. One evening, after a small diplomatic supper, Daniel approached Madison. The harvest feast seating draft is due tomorrow. Madison tensed. Why are you telling me? Because there are several open seats, and for the first time in my career, the king has instructed me to ask people where they wish to sit before I decide what their presence means. Madison looked toward Ethan across the room. He was listening to a trade envoy, fully engaged. He did not glance over to see her reaction. Daniel handed her the seating card. Where would you like to be? Madison looked at the options. One seat was beside the relief delegation. One was near Olivia. One was beside Ethan. This time, no one had written her name anywhere yet. Madison kept the harvest feast seating card for 2 days before answering. She did not wait to make Ethan worry. She waited because the choice felt larger than a chair and smaller than a promise, and she wanted to know which part of herself was answering. On the 3rd morning, she returned the card to Daniel with one line marked. Beside the king. Daniel read it, looked at her, and wisely said nothing. The night of the feast, Madison entered the great hall in dark green, the same color she had worn on the night everything finally broke. The room looked different though the banners were the same. The high table had fewer ornamental seats, relief workers had a permanent place near the center, and Marcus Hale had retired from the council. Ethan stood near the doors greeting guests. When he saw Madison, his face changed, but he did not cross the room. Daniel approached her. Your seat is ready. Madison followed him to the high table. A chair stood beside Ethan's. Her name card rested above the plate because she had asked for it. Madison Blake. No title added. No claim implied. Ethan arrived a few minutes later and stopped when he saw her sitting there. You chose this. It was not a question. I did. He sat beside her. Thank you. Madison looked at him. For what? For being here. Do not make it dramatic. I am sitting very calmly. She smiled. The feast began. Ethan stayed at the table through the first course. During the second, a military advisor approached with a folder. Ethan glanced at Madison. Excuse me. Go. He stood, handled the matter in 3 minutes, and returned. No grand gesture followed. During dessert, Rebecca Dunn appeared at the edge of the table. Madison had not spoken to her since the treaty feast months earlier. Rebecca smiled too brightly. It is good to see you back in your place. Madison felt the old discomfort, but before Ethan could speak, she answered. I am in a place I chose. Rebecca's smile faltered. Ethan said nothing because Madison had not needed rescuing. Later, when the guests moved toward the ballroom, Ethan and Madison remained at the table. Was tonight difficult? He asked. A little. Do you regret coming? No. Ethan nodded. He did not ask whether she would attend the next feast. Madison noticed. You are not going to ask. Ask what? If this means I am coming back permanently. He looked at her. Does it? No. Then I am glad I did not ask. She laughed softly. Ethan reached toward her hand, then stopped. May I? Madison turned her palm upward. He took it. The gesture was simple. Months ago, Ethan would have thought the story ended with Madison back beside him. Now he understood why that ending was wrong. Her place meant something only when she chose it, and his love meant something only when he saw the person sitting there. Madison looked around the hall. Do you know what is strange? What? I used to think I wanted you to stop leaving the table. Ethan waited. I did not. I wanted you to notice when you left me at it. He squeezed her hand gently. I notice now. Madison looked at him. Keep doing that. I will. She raised an eyebrow. Ethan corrected himself with a smile. I intend to. And you may judge the evidence. Better. They walked toward the ballroom together. At the doorway, an envoy called Ethan's name. He looked back at Madison first. One moment, he told the envoy. Madison smiled. Tiny things had broken them. Tiny things had rebuilt them too. She had once left the king's table because he ignored her at every feast. Someone else had taken her place, and only then had Ethan understood what he had failed to see. Now Madison walked beside him not because a chair was waiting, not because the court expected it, and not because love required endurance. She stayed because, at last, being beside him no longer meant disappearing.